told that I was reluctant to come into this world, and apparently I'm reluctant to leave.
We hope you stay for a long time.
You know, you lose your balance, you lose your sight, you lose your hearing. But you know, the worst thing is the shrinkage. I used to have a 30 inseam, now it's 26. Which means the third shelf is out of bounds. And the second shelf in the clothes closet is out of bounds.
Which one, red?
I do have some friends here.
Excuse my reach, please.
And I would like to introduce, first of all, my relatives. On my left is Tom Brown, and here's Adrian, his son, and here's his wife, Annie Brown, and here we have Alex
Alex is a
Amato, and a daughter, Megla, and Mike. We also have some guests, another Brown family, Don, Sue, Paige, Gavin. And I also have a niece of my wife, Coy Schumacher, daughter of Joe and Gladys, who first came in here. Also, her brother's supposed to come, but he's stuck out at the Amtrak station. So he's going to be a late arrival on the thing. The other day they had a comic strip called Plugger, and in there he said when he hears beep beep, he doesn't know whether it's the stove, the microwave, the telephone, or the alarm, or his hearing aid. First of all, we should announce people who worked on this thing. Candy and Marlis, where they went all out. And Friday, about 11 o'clock, I came down here, and there was a regular platoon of workers, and I want to thank everybody who contributed to this thing. It was very nice, and I'm overwhelmed by it. There's a word called motivation, and people write essays on just one word and so forth. But I kind of like to illustrate it. There once was a fellow by the name of John who was the sexton at the Sheffield Cathedral in England. And one day the clergy gave him this assignment of putting up the hymns. But he says, I can't read. You can't read? No. Well, you're fired. So John went to London thinking in bigger city, bigger opportunities. And he saw a lot of people smoking. So he opened a tobacco shop on Fleet Street. And that was quite successful. So he opened another one at the Covent Gardens. Stayed late and caught some intermission trade. And so he took the profits from two and opened a third shop. So pretty soon he had London pretty well covered. So then, of course, he went to Liverpool and Manchester and Bristol and Dover and even Sheffield. And since he became quite a success, he was interviewed. And the interview, of course, had a lot of questions. And he said, is it true that you're illiterate, you can't read? Yes. But he says, just think if you could read, what a success you would have been. And John says, no, I'd be a sexton at the Sheffield Cathedral. There was another fellow, Redbaum. He was a 17-year-old high school student, just about a C plus, that was all. But he had an interest in rocketry. And so he set off a rocket one day and it exploded. Well, as a result of that, he lost an eye, then he lost the other one, he lost the thumb and 2 fingers. Well, he made up his mind that he would never live with his present and he was going to live in a sighted world. So he went to the University of Utah and he was first in his class. Then he applied to Stanford and Harvard for the MBA, and they turned him down, saying the course was too tough. For a blind person, it's tough enough for somebody that has sight. So he went to Philadelphia and begged Wharton School of Business and was accepted. When he got out, all he could find was a small financial company, but he was accepted there. And they went on to great, and he became a partner, made lots of money, and finally he left because they had an argument over the Berlin Wall. He said it would be great for the stock market, but the partners disagreed. So he cashed himself out. And meantime, while he was still in the financial house, he had a personal trainer, so he kept himself in pretty good condition. Later on, he decided he wanted something a little tougher, so he tried one of the Japanese defense methods, and that consisted of grabbing somebody and trying to put pressure on the joints. Well, he was a little handicapped. He was blind, and he only had a thumb and two fingers missing. But he entered this contest that was for people over 50. He won. So some people thought it was a fluke. He came back and won for 2 years in succession, so I guess it was no fluke. And the Lord was even motivated. Today you could hardly tell a joke because of the internet they have a shelf life of about 12 hours. But I'll try one from the late Sam Ayers. He would tell this one at a drop of a hat. There was a lady in Fargo, she was outside of Fargo. She came into Fargo to have her children, and she came in for the 8th time, so by that time she knew the personnel well and so forth. And as she left, she says, "Well, girls, I will not be coming back." "What do you mean?" "Well, I'm getting hearing aids." "What's that got to do with having children?" "Well," he says, "my husband says, we go to sleep or what?" And I say, "What?" In the Gramercy News, there was something listed that I met the girl across the street, and pretty soon we were playing golf, and I got beat on the first round. Well, that was my wife, and we played golf for about 60 years. As a result, I'll probably have to talk about golf a little bit, since I played a lot of time. One thing we used to play was a Nassau, and that consisted of match play, and it was split up in 3 ways. Whoever won on the first 9 would collect, and the second 9, same thing, and then the overall. So it's possible to lose on one of the nines, but still win overall. So we used to play, and I would give her a stroke on every hole but the par threes. So it was a lot of fun. My real hero is Bobby Jones, which a lot of you probably don't know much about him. But not so long ago, Jack Nicklaus was given an award as the best golfer in the 20th century. Well, Sam Snead and Ben Hogan were there, and they very brightly applauded, thinking probably that they probably should have the award instead. But Bobby Jones was really a wonder. He got a mechanical degree in engineering at Emory. He had a degree in American literature at Harvard, and he could read Greek and Latin. And was he good? Well, in 9 years, he won the U.S. Open 4 times. He took second 4 times. One time he was 5th. And of course, he was noted for the Grand Slam. He won the British Amateur, the U.S. Amateur, which both of those were match plays. And then he won the U.S. Open and the British Open. Only body to do that. One thing he did, those were the old days when they had hickory shafts and wooden heads on the clubs. So he had a club maker make him a big head. Well, he found it was all right, except he couldn't work the ball. They liked to make it draw or fade at will, so they could really place it for the second shot. Well, things come around again, because that's really what they're doing. Tiger Woods won one major without using the driver at all, and Mickelson today, one of the best 5 golfers in the world, is now using a small head called a driver fairway wood, and he uses it because he can place the ball. In politicians, there's only one that's, I think, is wonderful, and that has happened to be a forager, Winston Churchill. Now that was a leader. When he was made prime minister during the war, he wasn't fearful. He took it cheerfully, thinking that all of his past life was just training for this one job, and he did it well. And he was especially as interested and knew that radar offered England's probably only hope. And so he wrote it on the commission that were on that thing. So he got weekly reports, daily reports. He really pushed him. So when the British finally had the radar, the watchers on the coast would spot the German bombers. They knew how many there were, what altitude they were at, and what direction they were going. And England had a new Spitfire fighters. So they rose up, and they were so successful, the Germans ceased bombing because they couldn't stand the losses. I have a book here that I can... Oh, there's something else I forgot.
Don't read it, Bob.
People, when they get to be 100, somebody always asks them, Well, how did you get to 100? What's your prescription? Well, the only one I can think of was one fellow who was 103 years old. And they said, what made you live so long? And he says, I avoid green vegetables and have a martini every night. And so I asked somebody that had computers if they could find some other people who were 100 and see what they said. Well, they didn't turn up with much, but they did turn up with some interesting things. Like Woody Allen says, you can live to be 100 if you give up all the things that makes you want to live to be 100. And it says Robert Brown says, I complain that the years fly past, but then I look in the mirror and see very few of them got past. Wisdom doesn't necessarily come by itself. Sometimes age shows up all by itself. And of course, the old one is old age isn't so bad when you consider the alternative. And the one I like best is by Woody Allen. It's not that I'm afraid to die. I don't want to be there when it happens. And I forgot to tell that if I was asked, I would say I had 2 stents, one in my heart, one in my head, and lots of luck. Lots of luck. No, how are we doing here for time? Some people read other books, but this one is the Book of Bob. Book of Bobs. Some of the guys are famous, some of them are infamous, but they're good. Before I turn the page here, one I remember is one guy who plays golf, and he was such a thief that he got a hole in one marked the scorecard 0. I knew this wasn't going to work.
I'll hold the microphone.
I think I got some help. Yep.
Do you want a blue one or a green
one? A great catch is like watching girls go by, but the last one you see is always the prettiest. And people who throw kisses are hopelessly lazy, says Bob Hope. To my lovely wife, Verona, who unfailingly provided me with emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and controlled carbohydrate nourishment. Sex without love is merely healthy exercise. Very often, the only thing that comes between a charming man and a charming woman is the fact that they're married to each other. And Robert Frost says it's a funny thing when a man hasn't anything on earth to worry about he goes off and gets married. Don't worry that children's never listen to you. Worry that they're always watching you. Don't know why that page is marked. Friendship will not stand the strain of very much good advice very long. Yes, that's true. You putt for show, putt for dough. And this was by Bobby Locke, who was from South Africa. And he said he could putt over peanut brittle. And the funny thing is, he putted off the toe of the putter and he hooked every putt. Every day I get up and look through Forbes' list of the richest people in America. And if I'm not there, I go to work. The average lawyer is essentially a mechanic who works with a pen instead of a Paul Green hammer. Consultant are people who borrow your watch and tell you what time is and then walk off with the watch. An executive is somebody who lets you go first in a revolving door and he comes out ahead. By working faithfully 8 hours a day, you may eventually be boss and work 12 hours a day. It's probably right, too. Rule number 1 is don't sweat the small stuff. Rule number 2, it's all small stuff. And if you can't fight and you can't flee, flow. The man who can smile when things go wrong has thoughts of someone else he can blame it on. That's a typical bureaucratic thing. Genius not only diagnoses the situation, but supplies the answer. I was full of ice pie, ice cream, and inexperience. To me, golf was just a game to beat someone. I didn't know that someone was me. It's characteristic of all movements and crusades the psychopathic element rises to the tops. I read that one before. There was a minister who told the congregation that he had an offer to go someplace else and make more money. Well, he was well liked. So one of the parishioners got up and said, I'm a Cadillac dealer, and I will give you a new Cadillac every year, and I will give you a Honda so your wife can transport your children. And another influential, rather wealthy man says, well, I will double your salary, and I will set up a foundation so all your children can go to college. And finally, an 80-year-old woman got up and says, I will give you 6. Well, her husband, who was 90, was embarrassed, had his head in his hands, and he was just shaking his hand. And the minister was embarrassed. He said, "Well, whatever made you say that?" Well, I asked my husband what we could do, and he says, "Screw him." I think I've run out.
You got one joke left, Bob.
And we'll save that for later. So, kitchen is ready, huh?
Alex and Annie.
Huh?
How about Alex and Annie?
What about it?
Weren't they
Didn't
going
I introduce him?
well, yeah, but weren't they going to say something?
Oh, you were gonna say something, weren't you?
That's in case you can't hear me.
You want to follow along? I promise this will be shorter. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Alex Amato, and as I am referred to as daughter number 2 by my grandfather. I'm the first grandchild. I want to welcome everybody, the friends, family, residents of the Gramercy, especially everybody who helped to put this party together. Thank you so much for doing this for my grandfather. It means so very much to all of us. I want to, my grandfather has already introduced most of us, but I just want to acknowledge again all of the family members that are here, especially those that have come from afar. Coy and Dawn, who are here, who are our cousins, and of course, our other cousins who were supposed to be here but are stuck in Amtrak. Most importantly, other than the family members that are here, she didn't have to travel very far, but Ruby is also here with us, and she's become a member of our family. My grandfather asked me to say a couple words tonight, and he only gave me one set of instructions. Alex, don't make it a eulogy. For those of you that don't know me, and to whom he has not boasted about me, I practice criminal law. I've been doing that for 20 years. I started out as a defense attorney, and then I've been a prosecutor for 20 years. So for most every day of my life, I'm in a courtroom before juries and before judges, arguing. I try cases most of the time. So most of the time I'm dealing with murder, robbery, sexual assault, all kinds of nasty things. And I'm arguing in front of strangers constantly. Most people don't choose to do what I do. Most people don't like public speaking. I actually love it. Lawyering is a difficult art. Good lawyering is even harder. The task, standing before a jury is really quite difficult, although I will tell you that I would rather be standing in front of a jury arguing a murder trial today than doing what I'm having to do right now. Celebrating the life of a centenarian is a daunting task. Celebrating the life of the head of your family is... As I told you before, I'm daughter number 2, and from the perspective of a little girl, and ever since I was designated that way, I understood that 3 things were particularly the most important to my grandfather. Number 1, family was the most important thing. He loved his family unconditionally, Grandma Ruth most of all, followed by my mom, and then my sister and me. Number 2, he loved his service to his country. He's very proud of it. And he's always good for a story about his service in the Army and about the time that he was stationed in Charlestown, West Virginia. And number 3, golf, golf, golf. I swear I wrote this on this paper. He's always good for a Bobby Jones story. And in case you don't know him, he's the most successful amateur golfer of his time. He won the Grand Slam in a single calendar year back in 1930. But not too far behind Bobby Jones is my grandfather, because he's had a hole-in-one at the ripe old age of 97.
Wow.
And just like I'm daughter number 2 and Annie is daughter number 3, he is father number 2. He's always been a second father to us. So many of the firsts in life that many daughters would experience with their fathers, I experienced with my grandfather. He taught me how to drive. He took me to take my first driving test. I failed it. He took me again, and he was there when I finally got my first driver's license at the age of 20. He helped me get my first job, which was at the post office in downtown St. Paul. He bought me my first car. He opened up my first checking account. He taught me how to balance it. I failed. He opened up my first savings account. And from the time I moved to the United States from Mexico in 1986, he has called me every Sunday morning at 9:30 sharp. Every Sunday morning. That is 27 years worth of Sunday morning phone calls. So you get the picture about the kind of man that my grandpa is to us. I think Annie's phone call is a little later in the day because she's not a morning person. He has lived and seen and experienced more things than most people would experience in a lifetime. World War I, the Depression, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Watergate, Iran-Contra, the Iran hostage crisis, Desert Storm, 9/11, Iran, Afghanistan. He's hated and loved politicians. He has voted for Democrats, Republicans, some crazy wrestler that became the governor of this great state. And when his daughter had the odd idea to move to Mexico and move and live in another country and marry someone from that other country, he and my grandmother handled the entire thing with great composure and equanimity. I wasn't around, or so I'm told. Hoy would know better. And they're here! Two of them anyway. This is my cousin Danny.
Hi, Danny.
Hi, Danny.
And when my mother then remarried somebody from yet another country, the crazy Swede as they called him, he handled that situation with equal aplomb. My grandfather has, to my great sadness, outlived my mother and my grandmother. And in his self-possession and his steadiness, he has taught me all there is to know about grace. He is my rock, he is my anchor, he is my compass, and he is my weather vane. He is my grandpa. So if you would all join me in raising your glass, I salute Robert Ward Barrett, born December 15th, 1913, and soon to be a centenarian at midnight, this December 15th, 2013. I love you.
Very good.
Do you want us to do the movie now or after it? The movie that we did, the 5-minute video. Do you want us to show it now? Do you want us to show the video now?
Oh, yeah. Can we do it?
Slideshow to some music. There's no words to it, so I won't give a speech.
Hi, Dan.
But we would like to have my grandfather sit a little closer to the screen so he can see. The video is just images of the life of my grandfather with significant moments in his life and art that we would like to share with you.
One joke.
So bear with us.
Okay, this one's for Gabby.
And the wisdom that Bob has, and it's just it is. But anyway, we enjoy being your neighbor, Bob. Now, anybody else have a, okay.
What I'd like to say about Bob is, if you could still find a Webster dictionary and you looked up the word gentleman, the definition would be Bob Barrett.
Of course, I've got to say a word. But the thing is, you know, we all say, how do you live to be 100? Well, for him, he knows how to handle stress. I think that's the answer. And he is a gentleman.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Bob's next door neighbor to the down the hall a bit from Bob, and you know, everybody's telling all the good stories about things that go on, and I finally figured out tonight with all his sex stories that he had going on, why he's leaving his key in the mailbox down here all the time. I'm kind of keeping an eye on his key for him and so on, and so on, and I think he's leaving it there for the ladies to bring a key up to him, and every time I knock on his door, I said, Bob, you forgot your keys lost. And I too have spent a lot of time in court, mainly, I'm not a barrister, but I sued a lot of people for collection and bills because I was in the credit industry. And Bob, as long as you're still chugging down the hall, I'll still help you with that laundry door to get it open. He's always complaining on how heavy the doors are, and they are too. Bob, thank you. You taught me a lot about the grounds committee and everything that we were on together and so on, and how to plant trees, and finally figured out that the green side goes up and all that kind of stuff. Thanks, Bob, and now you're on your second. They said the first 100 is always hard. So you're on your second century, so go to it. Happy birthday, Bob.
My name is Dick Beal, and I've been here since the beginning like Bob was. And I go down to get my mail, and I don't think there's anybody in this building gets more mail than Bob does.
I'm Doug Tiedemann, and I live across the hall from Bob. Enjoy it very much. Bob, thank you for this wonderful party, and I'm looking forward to your 105th birthday.
He's still an excellent bridge player. If we can do as well at 100 as he's doing, we'll be master bridge players.
I met Bob several years ago when my husband was doing business with him, and we were surprised when we met him here at Gramercy. He was just a delight to work with, and happy birthday, Bob. Gordy would love to be with you. Thank you.
Traffic jam. Lose weight.
Hi, I'm Otto Schumacher, Bob's nephew, and I think second to only my sister over here, Coy. I've probably known Bob longer than anybody else in this room. And I was thinking back, you know, I've known, he's been around all my life. My earliest memories of him, you don't remember day one, you remember a little after that, but what does a 9-year-old remember about his uncle? And I can tell you a couple things I remember about Uncle Bob years ago. Bob could do a one-handed push-up. He could do a one-handed push-up, he could do two-handed push-ups and clap his hands together in between push-ups. He could leap in the air and kick his heels together twice before he landed. I challenge anybody in here to try that. I tried all my life to make that happen, and I ended up with a cane. But then a little later on, I sort of learned why Bob was in such good shape. As many of you know, he was my dad's business partner at Schumacher Feed Company and later Schumacher Garden Center, must be time to sit down. Anyway, I worked with Uncle Bob, and at the time, everything that came into that building was in 100-pound sacks, and they were big. Thank God they don't. I think they do them in 50-pound sacks now, but it was all 100-pound sacks. And I would work with Uncle Bob emptying freight cars of, I don't know how many 100-pound sacks are in there, but you bend down to the floor, pick up a 100-pound sack, it's about all you can do. And Bob and I would do 200 or 300 of those in a crack. And I would often, I would be in the car where it was hot, by the way, and Bob would be down in the basement, and I'd be heaving these sacks down to Bob, and he would take them and stack them back in the warehouse there, and I could never keep up with Bob. All my life, all my time down there, I was trying to get ahead of him. And every time I'd be there at the chute with a sack, Uncle Bob would be ready for it down there, encouraging me to go faster. So those are my early memories of Uncle Bob. But then, you know, all this brutal hard work during the day, in the evening, Bob would go home and he would dress up like a gentleman. I mean, like the gentleman that he is. Always looking sharp. I always admired his taste in clothes and his ability to look sharp. Usually various shades of gray, dark gray, light gray, but always looked good. And he always inspired me to try to look my best. And as you see, I don't usually go to birthday parties in my necktie, but I wasn't going to show up at Uncle Bob's 100th birthday without a necktie. So, but somebody mentioned all the mail that he gets, and Bob reads constantly and is so knowledgeable. I remember he and my dad talking politics and current events and history and everything you can imagine. And Bob was right on top of it all, and still is. When I come to visit, we sit down and have these wonderful discussions that are amazing. So I think that's about all I can think of at the moment, but if I think of something else, why, I'll get up and happy birthday, Uncle Bob.
A lot, but he remembers it. That's
I'm Bob's neighbor from across the hall. And when he first moved in here, very nice man, his wife was beautiful. I remember when Ruth got sick. When he first moved in here, very nice man, his wife was beautiful. I remember when Ruth got sick, and I just want to say what a wonderful caregiver he was. He'd read to her. I went over there a couple of times, and he was sitting on the couch reading to her. He was just a wonderful caregiver. And he's, like you said, he's a true gentleman. And I really appreciate him as being my neighbor.
Bob's great-grandson. And I remember every Sunday him calling 9 to 10 o'clock sharp. And I remember my mom trying to scream through the phone, trying to talk to him. And I remember one time when my great-grandfather, when he went to Mexico and he ordered this salmon. It was delicious. And my mother and Bob were talking, and my mother said, "How was the salmon?" And he said, "What? How was the salmon? Come again. How was the salmon? Oh, it was fine." And they talk, and as they said, for 26 years. They've been doing this, and it's 27 now. And it's just, they've been, and every day before we go to church, he calls them, and it was right on the point where we were almost about to go, and then we come almost right on time. We get into the pew, and he kind of think it's a delay, but it's actually, he's actually just taking up our time, but in a good way. But he's a great guy. I like him. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Bob. Happy birthday to you.
Thanks, dear.
We're waiting for the next one.
I want to thank him for teaching me the fundamentals of bridge. And we used to play most Saturday afternoons. And when he was my partner, and he would bid, and then I would bid, and he would shake his head. And I knew I made a mistake. Thank you, Chuck. I was just reminded I forgot a joke. It seems that a scholar was in the library and it was kind of crowded, so he asked the girl if he could sit across the table from her. And she says loudly, "What kind of a girl do you think I am?" Well, he was a little embarrassed and moved on and found another spot. And later on, the girl went out and she passed him and said, "I'm a psychologist. I knew what was on your mind." And he says, $500 a night? That's outrageous. And then he whispered and said, "I'm a lawyer. I can screw everybody."
He's got.
All right. Make a wish. You don't have to tell me. It's inside your head. You gotta blow it out though.
Blow them out?
Yeah, ready? 1.
That just proved I was 100 years old. Of others that helped. I think it was a wonderful thing they did. And I do appreciate it greatly. And there is a Mexican toast, and I don't propose a toast right now, but I always liked it. It says, "I hope you have health, wealth, and love, and time to enjoy all three." Wow. And one last thing. This is an Irish blessing. May the road rise to your feet. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. And may the rains fall soft upon your field. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the hollow of his hand. And that, my folks, is my last hurrah.